This video has been a long time coming. Back in my not so good thumbnail days, I was on a quest of sorts to rationalize the lore of FNAF through just the games alone. A Herculean task that ended up producing some really solid ideas and fresh new perspectives through the lens of how I and many others view the games. It was based on experience and theories that didn't have any backing or relevance to any of the influence of the books beyond the Silver Eyes trilogy. And by doing so, really broke through to a less fantastical and jumbled mess, but more of a thematically satisfying conclusion that kind of bundled all of the OG 4 games together, and pretty much explained why Scott Cawthon himself said that FNAF 4 was too confusing to decipher, even though we pretty much had a lot of the pieces there in front of us back in the old days. But now, I'm ready to continue on the last promise I made you guys. I'm going to finally give Sister Location the full breakdown and lore explanation it deserves. We're talking story, lore, theories, speculations, details that have flown under the radar for years, and ones that Scott Cawthon himself thought no one would remember. So with that, here we are to dive back into the FNAF lore without the books, and by the end, I would like to ask you, the audience, what you think about Sister Location as a whole, and how it impacted the future of the franchise. But before all that, I just want to thank you all for the constant support and comments on my videos, and if you'd like to see better content from here on out, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment, or, all that jazz, whatever, or not, the choice is yours. I just love to see what you guys think overall. Now, without further delay, let's go back to possibly one of, if not the creepiest games in FNAF to finally put Sister Location's story back together.
It's so spooky. Whoa, man, it's so spooky.
The beginning is strange, given how the opening sequence of the game itself, when booting it up, includes a conversation between a man named William Afton and a mysterious other man, presumably a higher-up working for Fazbear Entertainment. His overall importance to the story is not quite clear, as really he's never mentioned again the entire rest of the game.
There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state-of-the-art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those.
She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
And that, Mr. Afton, is what we as fans now know as William Afton, the murderer that fans properly know as the Purple Guy, especially at the time of this game's release, because you have to think, how crazy is it to finally hear the name of the man behind the slaughter after 4 games of unknown characters and vague semblances of importance, only for this, a detail that was first explained in the Silver Eyes, the first FNAF book crossover into the game. Well, very strange to see that we've already broken the first rule of this video, which is to keep book relevance out of the game canon. Well, okay, I'll update the list. The ideas present in the Silver Eyes trilogy can be taken into consideration, so long as the game canon defines it as such within the game lore. If 2 versions of the same character exist across both canons and neither actually meet within the games, it simply will not be taken into consideration without being confirmed by outright stating so, or if there is sufficient enough evidence to prove such. After all, Scott did say that the books shouldn't be used as a one-to-one to solve the games, but they are kind of a guide for the rules and regulations for the franchise as a whole. So, now with that clarification out of the way, we can kind of proceed to the opening where a new technician called Mike, as seen on Hand Unit, is introduced to his new job via the automated robotic voice guiding him through his nightly tasks. The first night, he's instructed to shock Funtime Foxy and Ballora to get them back on their stages, followed by a visit to Circus Baby's gallery. Each night, after we complete our tasks, we are given different voice lines from a girl pleading with her father to let her go see Circus Baby. The second night, we are tasked to do the same thing as night 1, but with less than satisfying results. Things start to go wrong, and we begin to see the machines act in ways that shouldn't really be possible. Baby's not responding to shocks, the robots in their respective rooms move on their own and aren't responding, and Hand Unit begins to slow down as well, showing signs of malfunction, even passing us the fact that a dead body was found in the vents we crawl through to get into the sister location main hub.
So, funny story, a dead body was found in this vent once? Okay, so not that funny, but it's a story.
Oh. Okay. Well, anyways, towards the end of the night, we are left without the manual controls on, and suddenly all the vents become open, and we are sat inside Baby's showroom with the new revelation that Baby is active, and what that means for us is currently unknown, but Baby soon says this about us.
I don't recognize you. You are new. I remember this scenario, however. It's a strange thing to want to do. To come here. I'm curious what events would lead a person to want to spend their nights in a place like this. Willingly. Maybe curiosity, maybe ignorance.
She doesn't recognize the player, us, a strange detail that will come into play later on. But she is also aware that there are technicians going in and out of the place, so there is cause to assume that everything down here thinks we're just a run-of-the-mill technician, or perhaps someone more important. A little more on that later. Baby soon laments that something bad happened at a birthday party that caused the little girl that was begging her dad to let her see Circus Baby to be presumably killed and trapped inside Circus Baby when she wasn't herself, quote unquote, suggesting that the programming of these new batch of animatronics are special, and not in a good way. Special as in that they are meant to go out of their way to kidnap and potentially kill kids when no one is around to witness the act. Hence why Baby said that she was counting the amount of kids who were in the room prior to the girl approaching her to keep tabs on the amount of witnesses that could potentially prevent Baby from carrying out her programming. Something that, in all fairness, William Afton would definitely do, given the fact that these things are in fact his creation. You are then told by Baby to hide as the Bitty Babs are closing in to kill Mike. So once they are taken care of, we can move on to the next task. Moving right along, we're tasked with restoring power by bypassing Ballora in her gallery, and then making sure to restore power to the entire facility by refreshing and replenishing the power to, quote, Circus Control, Circus Gallery, Funtime Auditorium, Ballora Gallery, Parts and Service, Elevators, Observation 1 and Observation 2. Take note of this because we will come back to it later, especially the bottom half of the list. And whoa, before it's too late, no, I will not be discussing the TV cutscenes in between each night. I know we have those, but it will be in its own class of video. If not, I'll just throw it in the FNAF 6 video that I have coming up. Spoilers. So now, with that out of the way, let's skim through the rest of this game, as the only notable thing that happens is the fact that we get jump scared by Funtime Foxy and held hostage for night 4. This is the controversial part right here. The actual suit we get trapped in for night 4 could hold some lore relevance, as some speculate it to be either Funtime Chica or some weird concept like Funtime Fredbear because of the custom night for this game. But since customite will be talked about later, I'll just spill the beans on a character called Yendo. Yendo is, for all intents and purposes, exactly what you'd think it is. It is a yellow endoskeleton with bear ears and a structure relative to Freddy or Fredbear or whatever. And you know, I highly doubt that the suit is simultaneously a Springlock suit plus a Funtime variant of Fredbear that they're scheduling for these birthday parties. We seem to be entering fanfiction OC territory, so for the sake of argument, I'm going to say it's a Funtime Chica suit, mainly because there's nowhere else in the franchise where we see this suit in particular. Chica's the only one of the core 4 that's seemingly missing in this go-round, and she's the only one to have been made an official model of later on in future installments. The fact that we never see Yendo again after this is just because of the fact he was only made as an extra to mimic Golden Freddy's mechanics from previous games. Plus, it's easy to just say that Funtime Chica can remove her beak as a perk, and that's why we never get to see the beak part of the suit even in the files. So That's just how I kind of justify it, but don't get me wrong, this is just, in my opinion, the most reasonable answer with the information we had at the time, and even today it holds weight evidence-wise. Anyways, by night 5, we're given 2 options as endings. We either get scooped and used as a flesh suit by the amalgam of animatronics we've previously faced, or we end up with one final night battling off the Ennard amalgamation and take it home with us. I don't think this happens. So the true ending occurs, and we're left with all the questions in the world until the last custom night is added as an update to the game. And man, the gameplay itself is as basic as it gets for FNAF games. You're in an office and you have to stop whatever is outside from getting inside. There you go. That's it. That's the gameplay loop. You do this with sort of multiple game modes and assortments of characters per night and various difficulties and blah blah blah. But after every night, we see cutscenes pick up where the true ending, where Mike got scooped, end off. It shows the daily life of this brittle corpse Michael has become, roaming the streets day in and day out, with people becoming more and more concerned as time goes by. The flesh of his body becomes more and more grotesque and visibly purple before finally this happens.
You won't die. 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 You won't die.
All right. All right. Whatever. So now Mike, supposedly the guy that gets turned into an analog horror asset, is his own entity now. Ennard is loose elsewhere, and so now we turn to the last cutscene in the bunch, and this is what sets the fandom on fire and has been the point of contention for several theories ever since. Just take a listen to this.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead. But I'm not. I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
For the most part, I think this paints a pretty clear narrative, all things considered, which, saying that any of this makes any sort of sense is quite the Herculean task in and of itself. But this is FNAF, and if you're an avid fan by now, you're thinking, okay, yeah, this is just another day for me. Yeah, no problem at all. I digress. But anyway, we get to a point where in the fake ending of the original 5 nights before the custom night where you face off against Ennard, right? That night has a special Easter egg. That being, if you type on the keypad next to the monitor, you see all 3 computers change to live feed of the FNAF 4 bedroom. What in the actual fuck? And that's not even the worst part. The code for attaining this Easter egg is the year that the Fredbear bite took place, which, if you didn't know, Scott had changed the source code in the FNAF 4 teasers sometime prior to this, and that's where the whole 87 versus 83 debate stemmed from. Well, apparently this game sealed the deal, okay? It is officially the bite of 83 at this point, much to my absolute burning hatred. And why I think this matters is because of something that I will talk about in my FNAF Pizza Simulator video, that being the topic of the Midnight Motorist minigame, but again, I digress. How do we interpret this scene? The FNAF 4 bedroom being labeled Observation 1 and the plush trap hallway being Observation 2. You know, it's odd how they're both labeled as separate observation points. I won't be taking any theories from today's leverage, so with what we know as of this game, I believe this is showing us that the observation cameras are being set up from 2 different angles in the same house, or from 2 different houses, though we don't have enough information to say since we don't know what the other house could possibly mean for lore purposes. So for this, it is simply showing the same house from 2 different sections. Oh yeah, and there's also a little Golden Freddy plushie with a walkie-talkie attached to it. So this basically confirms the suspicions that it's indeed a way to communicate with the crying child and not, you know, a spiritual entity or phenomenon. William Afton has set up numerous cameras around Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and his own house to monitor the crying child, possibly due to what he potentially saw, you know, the recurring motif that was happening in FNAF 4 whenever he would enter or exit the pizzeria. Don't go towards the animatronics, don't go back wherever, because you saw something. What did he see? But we'll discuss that another day. Perhaps this pertains to the actual murder he saw, but that kind of muddies the timeline a bit, you know, and I always went off the assumption it's kind of like a spiritual entity, so the fact that it was reworked is worthy of discussion, yes, but we'll discuss that in a further video, kind of like to wrap up the series once we get to FNAF 6. Yeah, FNAF 6. FNAF 6 is going to be a very big video. It's going to tackle a lot of things. We're just setting up the groundwork for FNAF 6. Trust me, FNAF 6 is the perfect ending in my opinion, okay? FNAF 3, I love FNAF 3. It's my favorite in the entire franchise. FNAF 6 in these batch of videos is gonna be huge, okay? So prepare for that. But regardless, we don't have to attribute everything right now to a spiritual phenomenon, which, you know, I feel is pretty substantial because up until this point, we had no sense of agency to anything but the paranormal. You know, Sister Location turned a bit sci-fi, so I think the fan base just needed some time to adjust, in all honesty. We're not necessarily moving away from the spirits and hauntings and whatnot, but we are entering territory that can infuse science fiction with supernatural happenings. And so I think there being this new family dynamic and these new Afton characters kind of being the result of horrific deaths across these various games with just gruesome man-made horrors, which after the fact they possess or influence anyway, so there's no real reason to get up in arms about anything yet, in my opinion. Not until we get to the other books in the franchise, at least. But speaking of possession, there's this constant tug of war between Baby and Elizabeth, who we come to find out in FNAF Pizza Sim is the name of the little girl who got scooped by Circus Baby. But it's actually interesting to think about how Baby speaks in these sequences of the game. She always talks to Mike through the perspective of the animatronic and never the actual spirit that haunts Baby, which was always pretty weird to me, but it seems to be the case that the programming of the robot will actually override the will of the spirit inside of it, which is absolutely crazy to think. You know, that might be why, even though Baby still laments to us that she wasn't herself when she scooped Elizabeth, that she wasn't herself because she still has the memories of Elizabeth, but is processing them through the eyes of the actual machine that murdered her.